Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Symmetry webinar today. We're going to focus on our strategic solutions series. We're going to give everybody just a minute to get into the room. So as you guys are logging in, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to use the question and answer feature, and we'll answer those towards the end of the presentation. If you need anything, use the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring that throughout the webinar. I am Missy Gilliland. I'm the Learning and Development Director here at Symmetry, and we're really excited you guys could join us today. We are going to focus our webinar today on some of our strategic solutions and how Symmetry can help you. We are a company that serves everyone across the United States. We focus on home health, hospice, behavioral. We have a solution for every one of your needs, and we're here to help you in whatever way possible. Today, we have one of our industry experts here, Melynda Lee, who's going to share some essential steps for a robust growth strategy. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Melynda to get us started today.
Thank you, Missy. Welcome, everyone. We appreciate that you are spending your time with us today. We know you all have a lot going on, so thank you. I'm Melynda Lee. I'm one of the consulting directors with Symmetry. I've been with the organization 7 years, but I've also worked on the agency side as well. My area of focus is growth strategy, strategic planning, leader development, staff development. So all things that will help you have a robust, growing, sustainable organization and be able to serve your community for years to come. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's take a look at the agenda and what we're going to cover today. It's pretty straightforward. So we're going to look at the introduction to strategic planning, the essential steps in strategic planning, and then how to prepare for strategic planning. It is a process. We're going to give you a kind of a high-level roadmap today, but regardless of the size or financial structure of your organization, having a solid strategic roadmap is critical to the success and sustainability of your company. So our goal is to give you a high-level view of the necessary tools, data, and support to build and follow powerful strategic goals and measurable objectives, and we'll talk about the distinction between the two, that will guide you through the strategic planning process and position your organization for growth. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the strategic plan. So often we work with organizations who have a strategic plan, but maybe miss the mark. So we have this quote from Harvard Business Review is, why is it when a group of managers gets together for a strategic planning session, they often emerge with a document that's devoid of strategy and often not even a plan? So you're going to see the critical elements today that will make your strategic plan truly a strategic plan. It should be visionary, it should be short and long term, and it should be built on your stakeholders' needs and what you want from your stakeholders. So let's go ahead and look at the essential steps. So the first one is know your stakeholders. Who are your customers? So consider your internal customers, and those could be current, meaning your employees, or those could be future customers and or employees. How about your external customers? You know, we often think of our customers as referral sources, and usually patients and families, those we serve in the community. But what do we know about their pain points? Do we ask? Are we asking the right questions? Are we really digging in on the experiences that they're having? What do they need to know, or what do they need, and what do they want from your organization? Again, asking the right questions will help us better understand what the needs are. and what our customers want from us. And then what do we want from them? We have to connect the dots on what we do, why we do it, and why it's going to bring change for them and solve a problem. So when we think about the critical industry considerations, we have many right now, right? So staffing shortages, we have higher consumer expectations than ever before. We have changes, of course, in payment and reimbursement. And we've seen a lot more changes in the competitive landscape in the past 2 to 3 years than we've seen in probably decades. So these are the critical pieces that you need to study, you need to gather, you need to review, analyze, and consider when you're starting out with your strategic plan. So the second step, know your marketplace. So what do you know about your marketplace? Do you know when you last did a study or a deep dive on your competitive landscape? So like I said, we've seen more movement in the past few years than ever before. The pandemic drove some of that. Financial conditions, financial opportunities drove some of that. But do you know who's entered or exited your market, especially in the past 3 years? That's really important information to know. And also, what is the market share? What market share do you have? What market share do new entries have? What's changing? So what other changes have occurred as well? There have probably been mergers and acquisitions. We've seen that happening all over the country, joint ventures, partnerships, and entry of non-traditional service providers. And by non-traditional service providers, we all know the pharmacies, Amazon, and others, Uber, are entering into our area, not necessarily delivering care, but forming some sort of partnership with those who do. And do you have access to the best data? So when you think about the data that you have access to, you should at the very least, of course, have your internal data. So your internal data is what you capture in your EMR, what you capture in your CRM. You're probably generating reports. They may be going out on a cyclical basis every week, but are you really truly using that business intelligence to make decisions and to drive strategy and develop strategy? Do you have access to market data? And by market data, I'm talking mainly about Medicare claims data and other data that's available online and through your state. Reimbursement and payer data. Do you have the most current data that's available? Do you have access to changes in your market, who's entering your market? And then, of course, your quality data. So these are all key elements you want to make sure that you have when you're starting to step up your planning process. And then take a look at your core. And I can't emphasize this enough. Are your core market and your core services positioned correctly? And the reason that we bring this up today and in any strategic planning conversation is your core is what your business is built on. If you lose share in your core, if you lose services in your core, positioning in your core, you probably will not get it back. It's very, very challenging, and you're going to be running in place and making significant investments to try to recapture your core. So keep your core foremost in your planning and then build on that, because your core, your business that you have today is going to be the platform for anything that you do long term. So you want to make sure that you keep that strong. All right, step 3, asking your key stakeholders for feedback. This is something that as an industry and in many industries, we need to be better at. So survey your stakeholders. When's the last time you asked your stakeholders questions? It can be as simple as a SWOT analysis that's sent out using a survey tool. We need to be sure that we're uncovering the pain points. And again, this is your community. These are patients and families, referral sources, employees, could be volunteers, donors, depending on your organization. Influencers, don't forget your influencers too, because they influence the decisions of all the stakeholder groups that I just mentioned. So uncover the pain points and really inspire blue sky thinking. And by blue sky thinking, I mean exactly what it sounds like. Blue sky thinking, the sky's the limit. If there were no governors on the decisions that you were making, what would you do? And that's where the real creativity starts. And from there, you can start to follow the path on what you can do, what you can manage, what does make sense for your organization. But take it there first and see what you have to work with. When did you last facilitate an employee survey? Or for that matter, a customer survey? If you haven't done those lately, you probably should do those and compare your baseline to what's going on today, especially if you did either of these or both of these pre-pandemic. And don't forget your brand too. You want to measure about every 18 months to be sure that your brand is standing up in your community the way you think it is. And then the big question, are you listening? So you gather this data, you do these activities, you get your flip charts out, and you do your blue sky thinking, you do your surveys, but are you listening? All right, step 4, examine your why. So many of us and many of you probably follow Simon Sinek. And, this is one of my favorite quotes from Simon Sinek. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And what you do simply proves what you believe. So we all got into this industry to help people, to help serve our communities, to provide health care to everyone. And, that's our why. The people who come to work for you, that's their why. The people who do business with you, that's their why. So we have to be sure that we're keeping that in mind as part of this process. So think about what your organization stands for. And this is a critical part of the strategic planning process, because if you don't determine and define your positioning statement, your mission, vision, and values, it's going to be very hard to go forward. I mean, you're going to be, kind of following a map without any interest in the scenery or without a destination. So figure out what that is. So, you can start with your positioning statement, which is, includes your stakeholders. It includes what you bring to the community, what the value is going to be to your stakeholders, and then what the benefit to them is. What is life-changing in many cases that's going to be a benefit to them. So start with that. Then define your mission. Your mission is how you define your business. Your vision is where you aspire to go as an organization. And then, of course, the values that your organization stands for. What's important to you? And then again, think about your brand. How healthy is your brand? We often make assumptions that everyone in our community knows us by name, knows what we do, knows what we provide, knows how to work with us, knows how to find us. And if you really take a deep dive on your brand, that may not actually be the case. So some research will tell you that pretty quickly. Research can be as big or as little as you'd like, but you need to make sure that you're asking your community stakeholders how they feel about your brand and what kind of brand awareness you have and brand equity you have. All right, step 5. So determine your strategic business goals. And the key word on this slide is goals. So let's talk about that. So first of all, this is where you make that purpose that we talked about on the previous slide a reality. So what are you trying to achieve? Is it to expand into additional service areas? Is it to acquire either an extension of what you do today or a complementary provider in an adjacent business line? So you need to ask yourself what you want to achieve. So is it to expand services? Then yes, then you need to look at what those opportunities are. So how do you know when you get there? So defining success is probably one of the hardest parts of strategic planning. So what does success look like? How long will it take? How will you know if you're succeeding? So you have to define all of these and then be prepared to adjust your plan, because changes will continue to happen in your marketplace. Changes with Medicare, for example, and Medicaid will continue to happen. The economy will, continue to happen. So we have to be sure that we're prepared to adjust our plan. So, we always talk in terms of having a 3 to 5 year plan, but you really should be looking at your success and where you are to that plan every quarter. So think about clearly articulating your goals. These are not objectives. So goals are that more visionary, what you want to achieve part of your plan. So you start with the strategic goals, then you set your objectives. All right, so step 6, setting your objectives. Now, we recommend that you use the SMART model. And those of you who have worked with us before know that, we always use this as our guide. So when we talk about the SMART model for setting objectives, these are the key elements. And if you have an objective that does not meet every one of these, then you need to rethink it. So it needs to be specific. So what is it? So this supports your visionary goal. What is it that you need to do? Is it measurable? So how many, how much, how long? Is it achievable? So if we set goals and objectives that are not achievable, we're going to feel like we failed, right? So we have to make sure that what we're setting out to do is achievable, and not just from probably the leadership team around the table, but from the perspective of all your stakeholders, your employees, your community, your volunteers, your donors. We have to make sure that our goals and objectives are achievable. Has to be results focused. So if we don't have the results that we want documented, calendarized on a timeline in a project plan, whatever tools you're using, because you do need to have a roadmap, then again, we're not going to know when we get there, or even if we're getting closer, headed in the right direction. And then time bound. So every objective should have a deadline. This is what we want to accomplish. This is how we're going to measure it. Yes, it's achievable. Here are the results we expect. And we commit to doing this by Q4 of 2023 or May 1st of 2023. It needs to be that specific. So again, we recommend the SMART model. I do want to say that R also stands for realistic. And this is where a lot of companies get tripped up sometimes. We'll see strategic plans when we go in and we start working on strategic planning with organizations. We always ask for their former or their last or their current strategic plan. You don't want to come out of your strategic planning session with 20 objectives and 10 goals, because what will happen is, first of all, most of the people who are working on the plan have day jobs. Some have day jobs where they're covering for other people, they're filling a void, you're in growth mode, whatever the case may be. But make sure that it is realistic, because if you set unrealistic goals and objectives, you set unrealistic task list, then people are going to feel like failures, and you're going to lose the enthusiasm and the engagement, and probably other priorities are going to step in the way of execution. All right, step 7. So let's talk about execution. This is another place that is critical to your plan. And a lot of times we see companies who, they have a great plan. It's a beautiful document. Everything was done well, but there's no execution plan. So now what are you going to do once you've planned for 3 to 5 years? You have to have an execution or implementation plan. And so this is kind of the next phase after your plan is written and approved and everyone's in agreement. So think about the resources you're going to need to move forward. So first of all, you're going to need people to carry this out. And when you think about carrying out, implementing your strategic plan, people from all disciplines, departments, levels in your organization should have been brought in along the way on the strategic, during the strategic planning process, but they definitely need to be brought in for the implementation, because when you think about it, the people who are closest to your customers often are on the front lines. We want to make sure that we're getting the right feedback, the right messaging, the right level of engagement, the right experiences that we can measure and adjust if we need to. So what we recommend is for each of your strategic goals, you set up a team, and don't try not to put, the same people on 3 or more teams, but set up a team, have people around the table on the team who represent different functional areas, different roles, different skill sets, different tenure, and you'll have a powerful group of folks who will be able to move forward with your plan. Time. Okay, this is probably one of the biggest challenges here, is having the time to do it. So what you should do is, once you've started to put your plan together, you've put maybe some dates and your time-bound objectives together, think about the time that's going to be dedicated to execution or implementation of those objectives. So get into the detail. If it's going to take 20 hours a week per person for 5 people, is that something you really can do? Do they need to really dedicate maybe an hour or 2 a week? I can't answer that, because it would be specific to the plan that you've created. But that's important, because otherwise you will often meet resistance right away when you introduce this to your staff, because we know already that our staff feels overwhelmed, and there's never enough time to do everything that we need to do. So be sure that you include planning for time in your plan when you're looking at your resources. And then, of course, financial resources. So what's it going to cost to do this? We have to figure that out. And we may have to make some business cases. I'd say in most cases, we have to make business cases for why we want to pursue a specific strategic goal. Now, you probably have already done that along the way, especially if it's a more complex strategic goal, like an acquisition or creating a new department or service line, something like that. But financially, what does that look like? How long will it take? What are the milestones? What should you expect to invest at each milestone along the way? When will you start seeing ROI? There's a lot of strategic goals out there that you could implement that will start to raise your revenue, raise your admissions, raise your staffing right away. And then others, it may be, 18 months to 2 years before you're able to actually fully implement and start to see the ROI. And of course, technology. So what technology are you going to need? For one thing, you need to decide where you're going to calendarize everything. If you don't have an electronic project management tool, you should probably figure out one, even if it's something simple, so that there is a repository where everyone can contribute to their part of the project. It's easy to see. It's easy to see on a timeline. It's easy to see what the open and closed items are. And it's a place where you can create a community around the strategic plan. And that really helps with engagement, makes it a little more fun. And also now you have a repository where you can keep all your documents, your files, your data. So think about what you're going to need in terms of technology. And then training. So you've invested in your plan. You're moving forward with your plan. There's going to be training along the way that needs to happen. So it could be at different milestones. For example, if you're creating a new department, certainly you're going to need some leader development. You're going to need some staff development. You're probably going to need to bring in some subject matter experts to do some specific training. You know, it will vary by the goal and objective, but certainly you need to be sure that you put training in your execution plan. And then think about the external advisors and support you're going to need. So this, again, could be subject matter experts. This could be your vendor partners. This could be consultants. This could be your board of directors. So think about what you're going to need, and you need to, if you haven't already, bring those stakeholders into the conversation because they need to be part of your execution plan. And this is, again, one of the hardest things to do, and that's committing to change. So just because you have this great plan and this great vision and you're moving forward doesn't mean everything else stops, right? So we have to commit to the change. We don't deviate from the change, and we need to be sure that it's being hardwired as you go. That's where a change agent comes in. And the change agent can be someone on your team. If you have a project management team, it could be someone from your project management team, or it could be a third party, an objective third party who comes in to help lead this change, because change is hard. I mean, we've had a lot of change that we didn't even plan, in the last 3 years, and now you're asking your team to make more change. Of course, it's good change, it's lasting change, it's going to help you grow and be a sustainable organization, but it's still change. So having a change agent is really important. And so having and identifying and having your champions or your advocates for change ready. So look around, who are those people in your organization at the peer level who can help lead that change. And as I just mentioned, project management is essential. So if someone doesn't own the plan, and that would typically be a project manager, then it's unlikely that you're going to move at the pace that you need to. It's unlikely that some of the objectives and tactics will actually be accomplished or measured. Someone needs to be in charge of the plan, of the team, and they may not be a subject matter expert. They may not know anything about your business or what you're doing, but if they're a project manager, professional project manager, a trained, skilled project manager, they will be able to move the project forward. Now, you may have people on your staff too who are subject matter experts and are working within the change that's about to take place, and that's fine. Just be sure that the person you designate as your project manager has the time, the bandwidth, the skills to do it well. And by skills, being a project manager is a very special set of skills, because you have to gain consensus and get people really to do things to move the project along who don't report to you. And that can be hard, especially as with the as busy as people are today in the agencies, and when everyone has a day job and we're trying to move a plan forward. So these are things to think about. I mean, you really should start thinking about these things before you start your strategic plan, because you know when you get there that you're going to have to prepare for this. And the sooner you can start preparing your people, the better. So it's not as surprising you're starting to manage expectations from the beginning. And then prepare a communications plan and follow it. So there are different types of communications plan models, but really keep it simple. That's really the message here, because you need a communications plan along the way while you're planning, but certainly when you're ready to begin execution or implementation. Think about the different stakeholder groups. You need to be sure that you've captured or you anticipate what their concerns and questions are going to be. That's where you're going to build your messaging, and it will vary by stakeholder group. Employees are going to have very different expectations and concerns and questions than referral sources, for example. So, and then even within your employee population, you're going to have different departments and different roles who have different concerns. So think about, what you want to accomplish, what the overarching message should be, and then think about your individual stakeholder groups and what their needs, questions, concerns are going to be. Then again, this needs to be built similar to a project plan, but with a rollout plan. So how are you going to cascade messaging? Who do you tell what message first? How will it be communicated? And what channels are you going to use to communicate it? Because just sending out an email, just having a town hall, just, putting out posters, whatever you do, there's no one single way to accomplish this, because those around us have different listening styles, communication styles, expectations. Everyone's busy. Everyone gets a lot of emails and information 24 hours a day. So we have to also identify the channels and the frequency with which we're going to communicate the messages about your plan. All right, so keep these things in mind, at top of mind, actually, when you start to build your strategic plan. Be sure you have that data we talked about. So you want to be sure you're using meaningful data, and that's your internal data. That could be from your EMR, from SHIP, if you're using SHIP. It could be any of the data that you're gathering about your organization, and of course, your external market data. Consider the stakeholder journey. Expectations, of course, are higher than ever before. Consumers especially want to be more involved than ever before in their healthcare journey, their healthcare decisions. Usually we intersect in our industry between knowing there's a problem and knowing there's someone out there who can solve it. That's where value comes in. So you want to be sure that you're developing your strategy on value, because that's going to be your differentiator. There are a lot of companies, a lot of other providers who can go into your communities and say the same exact thing that you do about what you do. And we hear that a lot. We just need to get in front of them and tell them what we can do. Back up and figure out what their journey is, what their needs are, what their pain points are, and then talk to them about how what you do can change the way they do business or can make their life better. That's where you're going to differentiate, and that's what you should build your strategy on. So establish your success metrics and your performance tracking. So again, back in your measurable objectives using the SMART model, you're going to set those success metrics. Hopefully you'll set them at milestone intervals along the way in your plan, but you also want to make sure that you have a way to track. So you have to have systems in place and processes in place, and your project manager can do this, or maybe you identify a stakeholder on each of your project teams or your strategy teams to be sure that they're capturing and tracking that information and reporting it out so that you all know the details behind the work that you're doing and where you are to your objectives. That's where you create accountability. So you may get into your plan and you see, one team may be lagging behind others, or one team, was right out of the gate and started seeing results. This is creating accountability is really empowering and will help people realize that they're part of something bigger than just what they're doing day to day. and that this is something that's going to be a lasting change for your organization and ultimately for your community. And again, I can't stress this enough: communicate, communicate again and again. So establish early on what your communication channels are going to be with your strategy teams once you get to that planning and then ultimately the implementation phase. Set up what channels you're going to communicate through, and then as well what the frequency will be and what the expectations are for communication. What will you be communicating? And then along the way, bring your people in, keep people informed, because we all know that if we don't keep everyone informed, at some level that void will be filled with guesses, and that's where sometimes things can go off course. All right, so here are some risk protection strategies that you can put in place. Know your market share. Remember, we talked about looking at your market data. So that market data is, which now is through mid 2022, actually Q3 is out now. And if you don't have access to that, let us know, because we do have that information. We do have that data. Know your market share. Know your competitors, know what they're doing. What are their strategies? What are their tactics? That's going to help you not so much to, copy what they're doing or meet what they're doing, but to form your unique value-driven strategies. So that's what, know your value proposition and your differentiators. Everyone in your organization should be able to clearly define your value proposition and differentiators, and should be able to articulate that to anyone they're having a conversation with. You want to be the solution provider, the referral partner, and ultimately the easy button. That's the third part of that customer journey. There's a problem. Our customers know someone out there can solve it, but the agency, the company, the provider that's the easy button is who they're going to go to. And that's probably who they're going to stay with. All right, prioritize and focus the limited resources you have effectively. So when you're doing your blue sky, identify the best market segments to match your business and resources. So if you're, we, certainly do that blue sky activity, but be sure that what you're doing makes sense. I mean, is it an adjacent industry? Is it an adjacent type of business? Is it something where you have some subject matter expertise or access to subject matter expertise and resources? Be sure you're pursuing the right referral partners. Again, the market data is going to drive that decision and inform who your best targets are for referral partners. And this is something you really need to look at quarterly, because a lot of changes are happening in our markets quarterly. So be sure that you're doing that quarterly with your team, and make that part of your strategic planning update process quarterly too. Understand, again, what your competition is doing. They're usually, again, your folks on the front lines are the ones who are closest to your customers. Be sure you're talking to them. Have a forum or a window or some sort of channel for them to communicate back what they're hearing in the marketplace, and read the articles that come out every day. Follow industry experts on LinkedIn. You're attending conferences, probably you're coming to webinars clearly. So be sure that you're understanding what your competition is doing, and then objectively evaluate the options before investing your time and resources, because a lot of times things feel good. They feel like it's the right thing to do, but you have to make sure it makes sense, because we have finite resources, we have finite time, and our people are already pretty stretched. So let's make sure that we're using all those resources wisely. And this is what the model looks like. So the guiding principles for strategic planning: make sure you're using data to drive your decisions. So again, it's kind of art and science. If it feels right, it's the right thing to do for your community. It's the right thing to do for your people, your organization. Make sure that you're validating that with data. Make sure that you know your value proposition. What are the differentiators? And it's as much about the benefit to the customer. In fact, it's more important than what you actually do. So be sure that that feature, that thing that you do, that program you offer, that service you provide is a benefit to your customer. That's your value proposition, and that's going to differentiate your organization. And then apply the best practices. So make sure that you're following the best practices that are well known in our industry. Look at the best practice models that are available. Make sure that you're coaching, training, developing your people so that they are applying the best practices every day. And that concludes our webinar. I do want to mention that for the market data, we do have our market analysis platform, which is Symmetry's market data that's available to our clients. We call it MAP for short. And we would be happy to share that with you if you would like to know more. And I think at this point, we will take some questions in the chat.
Excellent. Great information, Melynda. One of the questions we did have in the chat, and I don't know if you'll know this, but there's a question about, is there a networking group for home health marketers?
There are actually several. LinkedIn has many, and I know that because I belong to several of them, but the national associations have them, the state associations in some cases have them, and then of course your online groups are available too. So I would start with LinkedIn because even the associations are probably going to have a presence there, and then find out what your local associations, your state associations offer.
Excellent. Did anybody else have any other questions? I know this was great information that you shared, Melynda. Love hearing how you approach strategic planning in such a comprehensive way. Were there any other questions before we close out for the day? Excellent. I think that's all the questions, Melynda. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we close out?
I just want to thank everyone for your time. I know this was a lot in a very short period of time. Go ahead and reach out to me directly or to anyone at Symmetry. We'd be happy to help you and have a deeper conversation about your strategic vision and how to get there. So we appreciate your time today and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you, Missy.
Excellent. Thanks, Melynda. And a recording of this webinar will be sent out to everyone that did attend along with the handout. So if you want to go back and reference anything, you should have that by the middle of next week. But as Melynda said, if you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can find all of our information at symmetryhc.com, and we would love to hear from you. Have a wonderful afternoon. We will talk to you again soon. Thanks, Melynda.
Thank you. Bye-bye.